when he was now in Australia, offered to see his files, and he realized that the people who were censoring his work in South Africa were actually his colleagues in the university department, that he didn't know about that, but that they maintained that they were actually his friends, that they helped his cause along by actually enabling the publication. And when faced with friends like that, do you need the enemies? I don't know. It's an interesting situation to be in, and another take on censor as a friend that we could discuss. My final point, and this is the one that I actually developed yesterday evening and mused over that at some length, but I'll try to present it succinctly, is what happens when the censor is yourself. One of the ways of dealing with the institutions is often to say, I'm different, I do not belong. And with writers, you hear this all the time. We're like cats, like herding cats. We're like goats, always off to the next sledge. But what if we are sheep in goat's clothing? There is this thing which I always sort of say, I would never like to be at the gathering of estate agents, because when you see 200 estate agents together, you suddenly see what it is that distinguishes the profession. But there is something similar about the writers being, a lot of writers being in the same room. You suddenly see that in that which we pretend to be, there is also something that is herd-like, yes? So, I do not belong. I say, and I say that all the time, I do not have enough time to write. I have to do this or that because they want to do it. They want me to do it, whoever they might be. I live with the idea that there are restrictions and boundaries, and that if I write or say something, I will be punished, that I may lose my job. That idea is strangely comforting. I would lose my job if I do this or that. In fact, very often there are days because of that when I feel less free than I felt because behind the so-called Iron Curtain, because in fact, whereas I used to bang my head against the wall, now I'm watching myself. I'm watching myself as I compose my reading lists. I'm watching myself as I write my emails, because under the Freedom of Information Act, I might be called to suddenly make them public. I'm watching myself as I write comments on my students' work. I'm listening to myself. I'm controlling myself. And some of that is for the good. At other times, perhaps, I might be believing that there are walls which, in truth, do not exist. I might be self-censoring needlessly. And this is what I wanted to discuss today. And why I wanted to discuss that is the following. This is the sort of final point I'm going to make. Under Milosevic, Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia, and his rule, his term of power, luckily does not coincide with my time in Serbia. I left long before he came to power. But staff at the University of Belgrade were asked to sign a new contract on work conditions, which was kind of something that we sign all the time, but that effectively meant a pledge of loyalty to the regime. Of several dozen people who teach at the Faculty of Literature in Belgrade, many of whom are my acquaintances, all but 4 signed. And those 4 people were brave. They lost their jobs. They had families to protect. But nonetheless, they didn't sign. I'm actually sure that in similar circumstances, the number of people in this room, or the proportion, would actually be very similar. We tend to behave in those kinds of ways. So, I actually wondered whether I would sign or not sign. And I kind of wondered whether I'm a coward. And I'm distressed to say, I'd like to say I'd be brave, but the only thing I can say is I don't know. I know that those 4 people were my very close friends. In fact, 3 were my some of my closest friends in Belgrade before I left. So I would like to think that by association I would have been one of them. But then again, maybe not. Given how I worry about things here in Britain, where certainly no one is about to put me into any kind of prison, perhaps, maybe not. Perhaps I would have signed. I also know that my parental grandmother, and I actually wrote about this in my memoir, narrowly escaped the firing range by, in the Second World War, when she hit a German soldier in the marketplace in Belgrade. That is my paternal grandmother. My maternal grandfather was put in jail, imprisoned for resisting collectivization in the 1950s. And as a result of his time in prison, he became ill for the rest of his life and had to be looked after by his wife. My mother had to abandon her studies for a while and then went back. The family went hungry. The reason I'm saying that is that there is this kind of idea sometimes, it's almost a stereotype of East Europeans that resisting is what they do naturally somehow, as though there is no price to pay. They paid huge prices for what they did, yes? And this is very important. Would I be willing to resist collectivization? Well, in small ways, I didn't resist. I don't at my place of work. I kind of go on with this alibi that I'm somehow different and because I don't belong, let them carry on and make their decisions and I'll just kind of do whatever I do. So, I don't know, my final point to do with censorship is that what bothers me with censorship is my inability to answer definitively this question, am I a coward or am I not? And I will perhaps end with that.
Thank you very much, Vesna. Thank you.